Welcome back to The Roll-Up. For today's episode, we sit down with Kevin Wang of Khalani to talk about the intent-centric view of the world. We've been positing this thesis for a while that the future of interoperability between roll-ups, L1s, L2s, and everything in between is going to be powered by a chain-abstracted front-end and an intent-based interoperability back-end. We talked a lot about this thesis, a lot about the intent-centric viewpoint of the world, the state of solver finance, and where we are headed with on-chain solving and some of the biggest opportunities in crypto today. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's jump right in before a quick word from some of our awesome sponsors.
Vertex Edge is now live on Say Network. Say users can now trade 50 plus spot and perp markets with the unified order book liquidity of Vertex Edge across Arbitrum, Blast, Mantle, and Say. The next 6 weeks, 850,000 Say tokens will be up for grabs as trading rewards every single week, exclusively on Say. Join Vertex on Say Network now on Vertex Edge. That's vertexprotocol.com.
Everclear is pioneering the clearing layer. The clearing layer can almost be thought of as Splitwise when you go on a trip with friends, but for the blockchain. What I mean by that is when users are sending cross-chain messages, there's oftentimes fillers and solvers who have balances left on different chains that they need to rebalance and reset their positions. This is where Everclear comes in. Everclear is pioneering a collaborative approach to the chain abstraction future, and they are willing to work with interoperability partners, solvers, and other providers in the space to build a interoperable and chain abstraction future. Check out Everclear at everclear.org, and welcome back to the Roll-Up.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Roll-Up. Today we have an episode about intents and the intent-centric world. I think probably if you're watching us for some time, if you're part of the community, you probably have heard of intents. You probably have a good idea, but I think like this could be a really good primer, an Everclear or an evergreen video about kind of like intents, at least in the beginning. And then Kevin's going to start to tell us why Khalani is the best thing since sliced bread. And we're going to have to tell him why it's not or why it is, but we're going to find all of that out. Rob's here as well. GM.
Yeah, GM. Yeah, pretty stoked to have this conversation because Kevin put me in a brain twister multiple times during ETHCC, and so I love the way that Kevin thinks and the way that he makes me think. And yeah, I think we're going to talk about intents. We're going to talk about intents and solvers. I think you can't really talk about intents without talking about solvers. So yeah, we're going to talk all about that, and then we'll dig into Khalani. But, you know, I think it's important to distinguish, like there is this intent-centric view of the world, but then there's also some other world views out there on how to view this technology. And so, Kevin, you know, this has been a topic of the conversation that, you know, we've had in the past. We have intent-centric, we have chain-centric, and then there's user-centric. Maybe you can kind of unpack the landscape as you see it, and also, you know, how you may see it if you hold a chain-centric view or an intent-centric view or a user-centric view.
Wow, that's a mega question to start the pod. Yeah, so thanks guys, good to be here. Okay, so let's jump right in. I like how you guys start. The chain-centric worldview, I think everybody at this point is probably very familiar with, right? So there would be multiple chains, and then you know, as in your title of your pod, many rollups, and users will submit transaction directly to chains, you know, hitting smart contracts, and you know, there's consensus reached, and you know, do the state transitions on behalf of the user, and then you get the results, right? In terms of sort of in this multi-chain world, then the chain-centric view is that the user will hit a chain, right? And that the chain will help the user to produce the outcome, right? Whether it's, if the user just directly want outcome on that specific chain, then, you know, it doesn't have to go anywhere else. If what the user wants is on a different chain, then the chain essentially need to help sort of do the chain abstraction, right? So abstract the way of interaction with the different chain, right? So that's what I would describe sort of the chain-centric worldview in the context of multiple blockchains. Then you have this intent-centric worldview, right? So the intent-centric worldview is to say, well, the user really does not have to sort of start their transaction sort of targeting a specific chain. They can just describe what they want as outcomes. The outcome could be on the single chain, it could be on multiple chains, it could be on, where the chain that they have assets, or it could be on a totally different chain. It could be on multiple different chains, right? The user just needs to, the application helps the user to author a message, aka intent, that's provable, so that the outcome, and give it to a solver. This is where solvers come in, right? And give that intent to solvers. And the solvers can help to manufacture that outcome for the user, but in a provable way, right? So, so that the solvers basically don't rug the users, right? So that's sort of a brief introduction of what an intent-centric worldview would be, and that's how users will interact with the blockchains. And then I would say, I think user-centric worldview is probably not very well defined at this point. I've seen some people start talking about it, but in my interpretation, a user-centric worldview to say that, like in the previous two scenarios, the user will give their transaction either to a chain, typically this is like a chain abstraction chain, right? Or to a bunch of solvers that are readily available to do something on behalf of the user. In the last scenario, I would say the user will give the transaction or intent, whatever they sign or authorize as the outcome, to somebody that's aligned with the user, right? So in other words, this is like your personal assistant, right? Your personal, we always, like a Khalani, we usually use the word solver just to everything, but this is like your personal solver. And then depending what you want to do, your personal solver will optimize just for you. It's aligned to the user specifically.
So it's like I have like Wintermute in my back pocket, and I'm like, yo,
yeah,
you
have your own white label Wintermute in your back pockets, right?
Do you feel like AI is going to be involved in that maybe as well? Like, is there
I think
AI agent something there?
I think AI agent will definitely be aligned, be involved, right? But that's like a much bigger topic. But then, okay. Then you have this sort of, even in that context, right? You have the chain-centric worldview and the intent-centric, or the non-intended intent. In the context of non-intent sort of worldview, this agent or this, this assistant, whatever you call that, it tends to take the role of a personal block builder for the user, right? Like multiple in the context like a multiple concurrent proposers and other topic coming up, then if the user could have a block proposer that's aligned with the user, this is like the extreme direction of use case of like how many multiple block that we can have. We can have like 100 million of them. Then everybody can have one, right? And then this block proposer, right? And block building, block proposing, and that can be all customized, and they can actually help you build a block and then propose it, like as fast as possible, just, to benefit you, right? So that would be the context of this chain-centric sort of personal, what did they say? Like account-centric or person-centric worldview. And then on the intent side, you have your personal solver to help you achieve, what you want, right? So again, these are two parallel works.
Yeah, so we have like these different ideas for how people are seeing the chains now, and just kind of like how we're seeing user interaction. So it's kind of intent-centric view, this chain-centric view, and then like this user-centric view, which is like, I don't know, it's almost like a combination of them, but it's like you have some sort of like personalized solver working for you in this capacity. So like in terms of like the transacting that we're doing like now, like how is shifting from like where we are now, like I guess you call it like traditional or like chain centric view, like how is that transition to intent centric view going to happen? Like is it going to happen? Like when is it going to happen? Like we've heard a lot about intents.
Yeah.
Like what is this going to look like to actually get to this? To get to this place.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can talk about like the motivations and the driving forces behind sort of intents. I think there are three, right? The first is user interactions or user experience, UX. Um, today's user experience, user interaction with the blockchain is not ideal, right? So user needs to know how to pay gas in the multi-chain sort of context. User need to know how to bridge, and transactions sometimes reverts, and so on and so forth, right? So there's a big sort of set of concerns around how to optimize the user experience for users. And then you have the second direction, which is from the application point of view, right? And this is when you see a lot of the intent-centric applications being built. You do get, once you build intent-centric apps, like, the most famous one, probably CallSwap and Uniswap Act is also coming with their sort of intent-centric way of interacting with the app. But when you build your applications in the intent-centric way, yes, you get better user experience by default. But you also get better optimization by tapping into solvers, right? And this is CallSwap often, have very good execution price for users, right? And then the last one is architectural concerns, right? This is what I describe as intent-centric architecture. And this is not just about building apps or building, facilitate better experience, but think about the much higher level to think about how we can structure like scaling solutions in the context of multiple blockchains. And then what type of infrastructure should we build to that's most optimal, right? So if you build intent-centric architectures, then you get both for free. You get, because intent-centric architecture is going to be the most optimal to build intent-centric applications, right? And also get the better user experience as well, right? Because everything's intent. So there are three levels, and I think they all have their driving forces. The intent-centric architecture is more towards sort of today's scaling issues. I think you guys talk a lot about this in the podcast. In fragmented liquidity, the market structure is not there, is not ideal, and you rely on solvers, around availability of solvers and all that, right? So that's like the biggest, like a macro, the biggest picture, high level picture.
I think it'll be helpful to put these different worldviews into like more practical examples.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned a couple, like, when we're writing in the intent-centric view, it's like, we're specifying like a set of like outcomes that we want. And then as long as I end up with, this amount on this chain, like I'm good.
Yes.
And then solvers kind of like figure out how to make that happen. And then in the chain-centric view, it's like I give a very specific set of instructions to a roll-up or a blockchain.
Yeah.
And then, they basically the blockchain just takes my instructions and operates those functions. It's not really up for interpretation. Like solvers don't really have like the creative freedom to like figure out the best way to optimize my transaction.
Yeah.
But like the intent-centric view is we still have very specific intents. Like, the one that I tend to use the most often is like Uniswap and a cross. And like let's use a cross as an example. It's still like very specific. It's like I am instructing a cross to take my USDC on Arbitrum and give me USDT on mainnet or USDC on mainnet. It's not general. It's not like a very general form of intent that I think we're going towards. And so when we're talking about like transitioning from this chain-centric view to more of an intent-centric view, like, how do we get to the place where, you know, I end up and I'm kind of like, I don't really care where I have my USDC. Give it to me on any chain.
Right.
And a more general instruction, a more general intent that can span multiple different blockchains. I don't care if I get USDC or USDT or DAI. I don't
There you
care if it's
go.
on Optimism or Arbitrum or Base, right?
Yeah.
Just give me the most amount of stable coins that I can get for a particular swap.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so going back to sort of the two approaches, right? Sort of in the chain abstraction or user experience point of view, from that point of view, you can kind of think about the chain-centric worldview as you pick a blockchain, typically the chain abstraction blockchain, as your remote control. That's your universal remote control, right, for the user. So what this chain says is, look, if you can interact with me, I'm already integrating with 20 other chains, right? I know how to perform interactions with them, right? So you interact. So first of all, keep your assets on me, right? Because that's how you interact with me. Keep your assets on me, and then tell me what to do. But the outcome does not necessarily have to be on my chain. The outcome can be on Bitcoin or Base, like you said, right? Anywhere. And I'm going to, after you send me a transaction, land in my block, and I'll take it from there, right? I will say, okay, you have this confirmed on my chain. Now, the next leg is maybe do a swap on Base or do another transaction somewhere else, right? So that's the chain-centric world. It's like a remote control, right? A chain that's a universal remote control. And then you have the intent-centric worldview, right? To say, well, you're actually not giving you a transaction on the blockchain, right? You are giving your outcome-focused request to a network of solvers. And what the solvers will do is they will prove to you that they have accomplished what you want on the external blockchain. Like you said, either it's a single chain or it could be on multiple chains, or it could be, hey, I want the maximum stablecoin as possible. But again, you have to describe, this is the intent application developer's job to help you to describe a specific set of constraints, right? Or proof obligations, like we say, that, like, what does it mean by stablecoin? Okay, stablecoin really just means USDC, USDT, and DAI, right? What does it mean by on any chain? Well, it's really realistically just these 5 chains, right? That we think the user should keep their assets. And also the what does it mean by as many as possible, right? So that means we assume all these tokens are 1-to-1 first of all, just because they're stable coins, and then I just compare the ERC20 amount, for example, right? So the application developer have to do the translation for the user and author the specific enough. Again, we call obligation approved for the solver, and say, hey, here are the things you have to prove to me that you have done this, right? And then the solver say, okay, do a bunch of things, and they come back and say, hey, look, I've got you this many DAI on Base, this many USDC on here, USDT on here, and the optimality is also provable. Again, that's sort of another different rabbit hole we can jump into, TEs and other sort of MPC networks and that stuff things. But but that's what intents do, right? And then back to your question of talk about Uniswap X or Cross as intent-centric applications. Now, if you want to express this in a generic way, today you don't have necessarily the infrastructure available to hang these intent-centric applications. So in the ideal way, these intent-centric applications would sort of be built and then can be expressed together with a, sometimes people call this general purpose intent architecture or intent infrastructure. And this sort of intent infrastructure will allow you to express not just, cross-chain same coin swaps or cross-chain transfers or, token swaps, but can be arbitrarily expressive. And then the solution may not come from a single solver, but could be coming from multiple solvers collaborating together to accomplish what they want. So that's like the big picture. Then we'll talk about intelligent architecture here. Right? So the three levels: UX, applications, and architecture.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point that kind of like this tweet that you put out highlights, which was basically that you're talking about the ways in which some of these applications are going to be writing kind of basically rule sets for solvers to interact with within their application, right? And this is kind of like this answers some of the questions around that we've been fielding around. Some users are going to only want their certain chains because of risk parameters, or how, like, do users care about what chain they're on? Well, yes, it's a spectrum. Some do. So that these types of written constraints, these coded constraints, kind of operate at the application level, and then I assume also eventually at the user level. There's going to be some sort of way to kind of set what you're comfortable with, as you're saying. And then you kind of brought this all together by illuminating how all of these different parts of kind of the stack, if you will, are like dominated by solvers. And so this tweet is very like, you're not dominated by solvers, but like influenced, and the order flow is coming through solvers via intents. And so you put out this tweet about SolverFi with all these different things that we have in the market today, basically in DeFi. I mean, really, like, this is DeFi.
Yes.
And so everything that you have here is solver centric. So maybe you want to unpack this a little bit and speak to some of the kind of bullish cases that you had here. And I'd like to take a stab at trying to kind of play the other side on some of these cases as to where things could go wrong. But yeah, maybe you could just kind of unpack this a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Again, I mean, we can go back to the chain-centric versus intent-centric sort of worldviews, right? So once you have like this chain-centric worldview, then this is the world that we know today. Developer build DeFi applications, deploy them on chain, AMMs, lending, and, liquidity pools. And then you have, bonding curves to determine the price, whether you trade or you borrow, sort of the yield you're paying, and so on and so forth, right? So that's sort of the chain-centric worldview. Now, the problem with that is you can deploy your DeFi applications on the chain. And but how do you get access to users from other chains? And how do you want to, what people have done is just, okay, I'm going to deploy another 3 copies on another 3 major chains. But then you have liquidity fragmentation, right? And, for example, for a lending application, the bigger pool you have, then the better rate or less volatile the rate will be. It's better for both borrowers and lenders, right? So that would be ideal. But if you deploy on multiple chains, you can only calculate the current, the current borrowing rate based on local state, right? So based on what's available in your pool. So if you deploy on, 10 different chains, and you're really just calculating that rate based on 1/10 of your protocol's total liquidity, right? And that's not ideal because it gives, from protocol developers' point of view, that's not ideal for their app. From their users' point of view, it's not. They're paying very volatile rates and unpredictable. And then obviously there's a UX, reasons as well. Like, okay, well, I'm happy to be on this 11 chain that you're not deployed on. What am I going to do? I also want to use you. What's going to do? And the chain also want to reach out to like potentially users from 50 different chains instead of just 10 chains. And then, keep deploying this one at a time is a lot of maintenance costs. There's a lot of infrastructure costs, a lot of like governance, everything comes up and become more and more harder and harder the more deployment you do. I think this is fundamentally the reason people think about, I'm just going to launch my app chain, right? So I'm going to now own my, have my own runtime and virtual machine, and then I'm going to concentrate all the liquidity on my chain. And then if you want to integrate me, hey, you have to integrate my chain, right? And we see a lot of, I think a lot of the DeFi applications are all planning to launch their own rollup or their chains. I think for this reason, right? So then, like back to Andy's question, right? So what is SolverFi, and why would that be an interesting direction, like from like the DeFi that we know today, right? The SolverFi takes a very off-chain centric approach, right? So instead of thinking about deploying, which chain I'm going to deploy on or have my own chain, and how to have everybody that integrate with my chain and composable with other DeFi apps on different chains, because not everybody has their own chain, right? How composability will happen, so on and so forth. Now, the idea of SolverFi is to say, instead of integrating, as a protocol developer, DeFi application developer, instead of integrating with the chain or having my chain, I'm going to integrate with the solvers, right? It's the same sort of logic and the same use case and the same users they serve, but they want to integrate tightly with the solvers, right? So the solvers live off-chain, right? So if you deploy your application in the way for solvers or optimize for solvers and for solvers to be able to use and so on and so forth, then you automatically, because solvers integrate all the chains, right? In the ideal world, like intent-centric point of view, then everybody can use your application, can use your DeFi app, right? Because all they have to do is just express the intent, and then, hey, solvers already have access to your protocol, and they can help user to interact with your protocol if you already integrate the solvers, right? So that's the idea of SolverFi. I mean, we have
And
to
I
break
understand
it
that.
down.
Yeah, and I understand that. But the reality is, like, all these benefits are very clear. Like, you want, if you're Aave, you're launching Aave chain soon. You want to be tightly integrated with all the solvers because you want to have, in this world of like chain abstraction and in this world of a one wallet account, whether it be like one balance particle or Near, etc., Zion. There's always players that are going to make this a reality. This solver activity will be happening kind of under the hood when you're using Aave on Aave chain, when you have assets on all different other chains. And so I understand this. I understand the multi-chain native. I understand the lack of fragmentation, especially paired with chain abstract UX. I do understand the integrations as well, the LVR and kind of MEV conversation, as well as the order flow conversation. So I get it all. But the reality of the matter is, if you're not in Amber's pockets, Wintermute's pockets, or in somebody who is dominating the solver industry's pockets, if you're not doing a handshake deal with them or you're not integrated, you're screwed. So whether we figure out how to democratize solving networks, which may be something that Khalani can help with, or other teams, or teams just do backroom deals with big solvers to get a better experience, the teams that have more money and better connections end up winning out. So that is the big problem that I'm seeing with this entire view is it often comes back, and I think this is a problem for other parts of the space, but specifically with your SolverFi thesis, the lack of democratization of solvers seems very problematic.
You gave me the pitch for Khalani. You saved me a lot of time, just describing the problem, right? That's exactly right. And I mean, we can talk about, we can go into the reason why this is the case currently. But you're spot on, right? That's the status quo. But it doesn't have to be the only reality that we can deal with, and this is why we built Khalani the reason for this is currently there's not a platform for solvers, right? And
what do you mean? Like there's no place where I can be like, hey, I got $10 million. I'd like to put it to work on chain as a solver. How do I do it? Like that, the process of joining the network or the process of becoming a solver is currently difficult.
I'll give you an analogy, and I've been around for a long time in the blockchain space. So I'll bring you back to maybe 2013, right? And Ethereum was not around. So building a decentralized application basically means you have to build your own chain, and realistically means you have to modify Bitcoin source code, and then put in some opcodes, customized opcodes. Like some people really go crazy with that, and then and that's your application. I mean, there are actually generations of dApps. They didn't call them dApps, but just they are dApps that's understood today, being built in that approach, right? But the cost of building such things is very, very high if you go that direction. Now, what Ethereum provides is a platform. Now, a lot of the sort of think about, Ethereum sort of the POW, so a lot of like mining pools, sourcing your mining pools, getting miners to produce blocks, and Infura or like node operators that will actually run your thing in a decentralized way, and then how to think about paying for costs like DDoS. All that is abstracted away from application developers with Ethereum. This is why it's a 0-to-1 innovation, right? Because it significantly reduced the cost of building decentralized applications. And the outcome of that is you have a new generation of developers sort of building on top of Ethereum. It's a very different profile with the folks that built dApps before Ethereum came around, right? Okay, so now we're with solvers. Again, we're like solvers. The solvers world is like dApp developers in 2013, right? You have to do so much. The cost is so high. And, you have to be like system engineers, right? You have to think about cryptographic algorithm to build your own POW sort of hash function so that you're not like attacked by Bitcoin miners or Ethereum miners. This is like the thing in 2012, 2013, and so on, right? This is why we have like Wintermute and maybe a few solvers are dominating this space. So, I said you were giving the Khalani pitch because what Khalani is trying to do is to say, we are going to be the platform. So we're not a solver network. We're not a solver as a service platform, right? So what you do is to say, instead of building the entire thing from scratch, Rust code, Python, whatever, running it with servers, you're going to write software, you're going to write code modules, and then you deploy those code modules to Khalani, just like you deploy smart contracts on Ethereum. You deploy its code modules on Khalani. We call them solving modules, and we can get to a lot more, but then your module, you can also refer to or compose other modules also on Khalani, right? So this is when you don't have to build the entire thing. You can build your own specialty and rely on, other solvers, the modules they deploy to collaborate with you to solve intents, right? And then in the end, you just run Khalani node as your solver, right? So just run our node solver as your partial solver or as your full solver, because you still may say, hey, I have some secret thing that I don't want to share with the world. That's fine. Just leave it local. And then the part that you want to share and then you do want to collaborate with others on, like liquidity and stuff, they can be on-chain, right? So that's what Khalani does. The hope is that with this approach, just like Ethereum radically reduce the cost of building, dApps, we're going to radically reduce the cost and barrier building solvers. So anybody can build a solver, not anybody, but 100x cheaper to build solver. You don't have to compete with Wintermute on 20 different dimensions, execution cost and liquidity, inventory, reach, centralized exchange access, and I don't know, block building. That's also the big one. Yeah, go ahead.
Like I get it, and like I'm bullish. It's a cool idea. It's gonna work, I think. But like, I think it's still far-fetched to say that you're gonna be able to get somebody with $5 million, put them on Khalani, and they're gonna be able to compete with Wintermute via some sort of collaborative solving. Like, I just don't see how how even a collaborative model is going to be able to, basically Wintermute and like these big solvers are effectively operating a tragedy of the common situation where there is extractable value to be had. They can catch all the fish. I feel like the only way is that they have to like give away some of these like niches. So like maybe you have a set of collaborative solvers on Khalani that dominate like 3 chain routes, where Wintermute is kind of like, it's like Star Wars. They're like, you guys go to that galaxy. We're like the Imperial. You guys go to that galaxy over there and you guys can own that little galaxy, right? And they have their own way of life. And like, I just don't see how, unless Wintermute is just going to be like, screw it, we're only going to solve for like the top 10 biggest chains and we'll let all the other chains kind of just go to smaller solvers. Maybe that's going to happen. Maybe you can like, I know Rob has questions as well, but like maybe you can like fill me in on how you see that vision playing out. Like how are these guys going to interact, and also how does Khalani's solver networks that are collaborative kind of prove me wrong?
Welcome aboard on our journey into the singularity. This is the endgame roadmap for Frax and Fraxtal. the new L2 out of the Frax ecosystem that is totally based on fractal scaling. Fractal is a modular L2 blockchain built by Frax with modular and fractal scaling in mind. Fractal scaling is based on the Mandelbrot set of fractal images, and it explains how L2s become L3s and the entire app chain lifecycle goes through its evolution. The Frax ecosystem is made of some of the top builders in the space and has stemmed from its OG days of the Frax stablecoin. It is now in the LST space, the LRT space, and this Fractal L2 joins the existing suite of Frax products, including Frax Swap and Frax Lend. You can see Frax Ferry, the bridge to go from any chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, or mainnet into the Fractal mainnet. Bridge your tokens and bring your Frax assets into the Fractal ecosystem. Join today to get the best out of Fractal. You are still early. Join today. Take part in our expedition into the singularity.
Covalent is solving the long-term data availability problem where a lot of the data availability providers today in the modular space, when you post data to them, they actually only hold that data for about 12 to 16 days. And then it's basically, it could go into an archive node, or oftentimes it's just kind of put away into the abyss. And what Covalent's trying to do is build this long-term data availability solution, which can plug into some of these modular data availability providers and provide this longer-term perpetual data solution. So what we try to think of this as is when you post transaction data onto Celestio or Veil or any of these modular DA solutions or even Ethereum, Covalent is able to provide a long-term data storage and data availability platform for that data after the time period. Blockchains are billboards, not databases, and we need these providers in the space to be able to kind of hold on to the long-term data that is provided from these providers and these blockchain state. This is where Covalent comes in. They just had a nice rebrand. Check them out on Twitter as well as the website. Thank you for being here. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
So, getting the same question, right? Like, what do you think Wintermute's core strength is, core advantage is? And then we can go from there, right? Because a lot of it is, the whole SolverFi thesis is to unbundle Wintermute. So whatever their core strength is, you just unbundle it. And then you can optimize in single dimensions. We cannot beat Wintermute like as a whole, but we can beat them like on specific things. For example, like lending, right? Like in terms of capital available for solvers to borrow at runtime to be able to facilitate the intent, right? Like if you look at DeFi, Aave has billions of inventory to be borrowed, and you can happen like on the spot, right? Can we beat Wintermute just on lending alone? Probably yes. And then you talk about, okay, what about cross-chain? Okay, Wintermute maybe on 5 chains or 10 chains. Layer 0, Hyperlane across, maybe on 100 chains. So just on that dimension, can we beat Wintermute? Yes, right? And then you talk about inventory, right? Wintermute may have tens of millions of inventory, like for trading. Guess what? Uniswap has billions. Can we build SolverFi, something like Uniswap, or maybe Uniswap itself, right? So that we can beat Wintermute on inventory? I think yes, right? And then you just do the same. Like, what about, settlement, and, stablecoin liquidity, and, exchange access, right? Do we have, like, for example, somebody that's maybe like somebody just quit their quant trading fund job, and maybe they do have a very sophisticated, or maybe they work for one of the leading, maybe it's Wintermute employees that quit their job and say, hey, guess what? I can do it on my own, right? I don't need your infrastructure because SolverFi or Khalani or whoever is provide me all the infrastructure I need, right? So I can just describe my trading strategy as an algorithm. I basically function as a collaborative solver, and then I tap into liquidity provided by a SolverFi liquidity protocol. So I can just focus on one thing. Yeah, then right. Guess what? I can be on par with the whole machinery of Wintermute. So that's kind of the idea.
Or you can at least justify it and make it profitable long term, and actually have sustainable product market fit from like a revenue perspective for the economics of the system. But then most importantly, I mean, realistically, like the economics of the system are important for you guys to stay around, to do well by your investors and such. But what's really the knock-on effect of doing this, of finding these niches of these lending markets, or of specific cross-chain roll-up cluster niches, or of kind of these, is then the whole UX of for everybody gets better, which is like what we're all here for ultimately. But like finding those, like it's often funny how in crypto you have to find product market fit to make economics make sense, to then give the benefit of your product to everybody in the space. So they're kind of two hand in hand.
I'll counter that as well, because this is another way we can beat Wintermute. I'm kind of going to put them on the spot. I don't know why, but
yeah, I was almost thinking you guys could probably collaborate with them in some capacities to further unbundle them as well.
Yeah, so that's another big topic. But yeah, okay. So bringing back to like profitability locally on the specific dimension, right? When you have collaborative solving, when you have collaboration mode enabled, not every sort of segment have to be profitable, right? This is the same idea as casinos will run bus services at a loss, like a loss leader, right? So you could go to a roll-up and say, hey, guess what? Why don't you just pay people like free liquidity to come to your chain?
Yeah, you're going to have to raise your Series A. You're going to have to raise that Series A there a little faster, buddy.
You raise like $50 million, right? And then why don't you give like, 200 grand liquidity to come into your chain, and just make it free of cost, right? And it makes sense for you, right? It makes sense. You want users to come, and you don't want users to pay gas and everything, right? So optimization, when it applies locally, you can always find the best type of optimization, because then you can consider local reasons to help you optimize. Something like a big, solver or centralized location, they can never get this, right? But when you aggregate these locally sort of subsidized solutions together, you actually get better execution among the dimensions that you want, right? Be decentralized infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, anything that's like niche down for specific use case, I imagine you guys have already done research and you can further validate this idea that is, like you could have specific types of solver infra and different types of solvers off chain that you work with, which specialize more in different areas, right? So you can beat the large behemoths and kind of these like insurmountable forces that seem at paper by specialization, by niching, by going after specific ideas or places that they might not be, and just kind of doing it slowly over time, and then having like opening it up, into larger and larger scope. So super, super cool thesis.
So that is the modular thesis, right? So
yes, it is just modular solvers.
Right, modular solvers, and the motivation to build Khalani is to decentralize Wintermute, and you're doing that by providing a platform for modular solvers. But like, can we just like really dig deep into like how does it work? How, if someone is coming onto Khalani and they're face to face with the platform, what are they doing? How can they use Khalani to build their own solver that ultimately, collectively all these solvers end up overpowering Wintermute?
Yeah, again, I think it's probably easier to think about like pick a specific use case to talk about this. I think for your audience, probably like cross-chain intents are, you interview Hart and some of the, cross folks. The idea is we can enable sort of intent-centric cross-chain swaps, right? To transfer, let's say, USDC from one chain to another chain. Now, the challenge with today's sort of solving infra is without solver collaboration, right? It means a single solver have to be able to interact with both chains, right? They need to sort of lock user deposit on source chain and then, pay the user on the destination chain and then bring back a proof that the user accepts on the source chain, right? So in other words, they have to observe both chains. The problem with this approach, as you have too many rollups in chains, it's going to be increasingly difficult for you to have solver that happen to know both source and target. And when that happens, you just have a liveless failure, right? So like, well, I want to, bridge from my own game app chain to this, CDK chain layer 3. Guess what? Probably nobody's even knowing both of them. It just two long tail chains.
Brother, on a cross right now, sometimes after Arbitrum, you got to wait 5 minutes. Sometimes it's 2 seconds.
Oh, wow, okay.
We're talking ancient 88 gaming chain
Yeah.
connecting to freaking the new Clearpool Ozin chain. Come on.
Exactly. It's not possible, right? And, even the chain themselves have incentive to run their own solvers, which they do. But then guess who they're going to observe on the other side? They should, okay, I'm going to facilitate my own liquidity. I'm going to facilitate my own, I run my RPC and, all that. But I may observe like the top 10 chains, top 20 chains maximum. I'm not going to just happen to observe your game chain. Right? Like, how do I even know you exist? I just don't. So that's fundamentally is the challenge, right? If you do this intent-centric sort of, fast finality and so on. So with solver collaboration, what we do is to say, we're going to break down this role, this solver, supposedly this, this solver need to, like currently what the solver needs to do is they have to be able to send the transaction on the source chain. They have to send the transaction on the target chain, destination chain. They have to have access to liquidity exactly on the target chain. And they have to have an oracle they know how to bring back to the source chain, right? And then have to have inventory. Right? Even though they know how to do this, but they don't have USDC on the chain, they can't even fill you. So what we do is we're gonna break this down to smaller pieces, right? So it's gonna be a solver that know how to interact with the source chain. Another solver know how to interact with the target chain. It's pretty dumb. You give me a payload, I send a transaction, right? That's a pretty simple task. The availability for that would be much, much higher, right? You can assume much, much higher availability. And then you have liquidity providers, like in Khalani, everything is a solver, right? So liquidity providers, we call them liquidity solvers. Again, don't laugh, right? So they say, hey, I bring liquidity. I don't run these offer, but hey, I've got, USDC here and USDC there. If you want to push me around, I'm happy to just take these 2 chains as my inventory that I hold. And then you have provers, right? Provers are pretty dumb too and say, hey, guess what? I'm on this app chain, right? And all I do is generate a proof that you've done something, right? And again, there can be many, many different type of provers based on, like every bridge is essentially some sort of a prover, like something happened on one chain that you can relate to somewhere else, right? So, hey, I can do this. I run the validator set, the test stuff that happened on this chain, right? And then the other direction, I have a different set of validators or testers that attest something happened on that chain, right? So you have all these type of, like, we call those attestation providers, kind of attestation solver or finality solver, whatever you call it. But, if you squint like hard enough, everything is a solver, like they're all just agents perform singular tasks. As long as you can have them all work together in a trustless way, then the system works. It's a much better availability. It's a much better, we can talk about like being expressive and, you can reach a lot more. You can do more things. And it's actually a decentralized infrastructure, right? So you don't have to, like all these are just smaller players that they do single things, but you just put them together.
I'm thinking about Khalani, like almost similar to the way I think about Eigenlayer for shared security, but Khalani for shared solver infrastructure. And there's going to be this, you're going to need to coordinate between these solvers, right?
Yes.
So how is that done? How do you coordinate, if there's a solver on that chain XYZ and it's some random ancient 88 game, right? I guess that's the chain that we're using as an example. And then over here, way over there, there's some random other chain, right? It takes very long to get assets from one to the other if you're using canonical bridges or even if you're using like existing solver infrastructure. But for Khalani, it's, we're saying that we're breaking these down into smaller pieces, but you still need to coordinate amongst all those pieces.
Absolutely. Yeah, so like, that's all we do. Yeah.
What is the like the specification of like the Khalani node network that is sending messages with like very low latency and very high security, such that you're able to transmit messages, between these very niche chains at a high pace, fast pace, but also high security.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, there are many things to unpack there, right? I mean, we can answer the high security part first, right? Because that's what intent systems are supposed to provide as guaranteed for the users. Otherwise, nobody should use the intents, right? So the safety part comes from sort of proofs, right? So you can think about intent system like always do something for me, get paid later sort of system, whereas like the non-intent, I don't know, chain-centric worldview or anything that like we don't use intents, it's the opposite. It's I ask you to do something, I trust you can do it, right? I'm sending the transaction to the blockchain, then I don't know, I trust you. I mean, you don't have to prove me you've done it to be able to charge me gas. I'm just willing to pay gas upfront, right? So even if it's failed, you get some gas from me as well. Whereas the intent-centric view is the inverse of this. Is to say, I wanted this, but guess what? You're not get paid at all if you don't prove to me that you have done it, right? So that's the intent-centric worldview. That's the safety guarantees for the user. The user express the intent. If the solvers cannot prove to the user that this has been done, then the solvers are not paid, right? The users don't lose anything. So that's the safety part of it. And that is enforced by on-chain smart contracts, right? On-chain proof checks, verification, basically. So that's the safety part. It doesn't matter. This is mostly local chain. If it's cross-chain, the user have to opt into a cross-chain proof system or cross-chain verification system or attestation system that typically is a bridge. Mostly, it can be a bridge. It can be an Oracle. You can use CCIP and say, hey, I trust Chainlink CCIP attestation to say something happened on the other chain. That's fine too. It's kind of like a bridge as well. So that's the safety part of it, right? So you have to prove to me you've done something to be able to get my assets, right? Now, the decentralization part of this comes from Khalani itself as a solver collaboration platform. It's also a decentralized infrastructure, right? It's not roll up the service or solver as a service that we just run a server and help you to launch a solver, right? We are actually a blockchain that, have decentralized validator sets and, stuff like that anybody can participate and anybody can deploy solving modules on Khalani and, it's open participation, decentralized and, all that, right? And then I'm trying to think, what's the other thing that you mentioned? You mentioned
the third one was speed, which I have a feeling the speed it's fast because it's off chain.
Not necessarily, right? This is where it talks about optimization for the users. If for the user latency is important, then they can do solver competition based on latency, right? If it's not important, if the user truly I'm cost centric, like all the way down, then say whoever give me I don't care about latency, right? So whoever can offer me the cheapest cost, then I'll pick that. So going back to like the very early conversation, the question that we talk about, it's like chain centric, intent-centric users. This is like a user centric expression. If the user want latency a priority, then they will pick the solvers that will compete on the dimension of latency. So it's possible that you can get really, really fast. Maybe you pay a little bit more, right? But that's the idea.
How fast is really fast? 200 milliseconds? 50 milliseconds?
Again, this basically can mempool level fast, right? But again, we're going to like a lot of technical details, right? But the sort of the correct answer is as soon as the solver is certain that the user's commitment, intent is sort of a credible commitment towards like satisfaction condition. As soon as the solver is certain the commitment is made, and then the solver can trust the finality of that commitment, then the solver just can't fail, right? So if you have a sort of off-chain infrastructure, or I think one balance is building like credible accounts on off-chain infrastructure. If the commitment is instant, basically as soon as you see it, it's done. There's no way that can revert or equivocate and all that. Then it's just instant, right? So as fast as the information can propagate.
Cartesi is your home for app-specific rollups. At the forefront of developing new tools and platforms that enhance the capabilities of blockchain technology, Cartesi enables applications that are flexible and built to scale. Build on a full Linux environment and use traditional software libraries, but in blockchain development. Go to cartesi.io, that's cartesi.io, to learn more about building your own app chain today.
Mantle is a layer 2 blockchain with one of the biggest on-chain treasuries in all of crypto, and they have a 100-day campaign called Metamorphosis live now. What this is it is a campaign for their liquid staked ETH token, METH, as well as their upcoming liquid restaking token, CMETH, where you can utilize this token on the Mantle network in a variety of different apps, some of your favorite restaking protocols and DeFi protocols, and earn yields in the form of powder, which will eventually be turning into a governance token. Mantle's been around for a while. We like them because they use their own form of EigenDA. They have a good ecosystem and they're growing. So check out this 100-day Metamorphosis campaign, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of this video.
Got it. Yeah, because part of my thesis for like this whole intent-based interrupt system is that like we're gonna have this like chain abstracted UX is gonna be basically powered by what you guys are building amongst other teams underneath. Like, yeah. I don't think right now we need synchronous composability outside of these like roll-up clusters, if you will. I think like from most cross-chain interactions, unless it's like within the super chain or like within the ZK stack or like within this ag layer, like they don't really need to be like same block. I mean, there's a lot of use cases where that's really advantageous. And I would actually posit that as an argument against Khalani and against the intent-centric roadmap, is that there are use cases which are not as functionally don't achieve the same level of functionality as they would in an atomic environment. But like for the current thesis that we're holding, I think it's really like, let's get these intent-based systems with really low latency firing with a chain abstracted UX, and then a lot of this cross-chain kind of experience will be such that you go on an application, you quick swap on Uniswap, it does a transaction for you on whatever chain you're on, and your wallet shows your balances, and the bridging happens, and the swap happens underneath. You get an intent-based bridge under 200 milliseconds, ideally under 500. Then you get a swap with a pre-confirmation on an L2 in 2 seconds, totaling less than 3 seconds from the time you click the button to the time that the cross-chain swap happened, basically, or the bridge and the swap. And then that all feels like it just happened on Ethereum L1 with a really minimal gas fee and bridge fee, or like, fee to the relayer. That to me feels like closer than a lot of people think, and also feels like a big unlock for this kind of Ethereum fragmentation.
Are you talking about synchronous composability?
I don't think that is going to be necessary to get the UX unlock. I think the intent-based model with like sub 200 milliseconds is going to be enough.
Yeah, I think it's not just latency, right? I mean, I sense you have some reservations. That's why I ask. So if you really dig in and think about this, right? So first of all, intents are asynchronous sort of systems. But for the user, from the user perspective, it's atomic, which means either what I ask is done or nothing happens, right? That's almost definition of atomicity, right? My asset stays on where I am unless somebody proves to me that this work is done. So from user's point of view, it is atomic, right? Now the actual execution, because I have multiple virtual machines and state machines, then obviously it's not going to be the atomic, but that's sort of engineering details. From user experience point of view, it is atomic, right?
Yeah, that's kind of my point.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. And I'm trying to take a step here. I don't know if this is exactly your argument, but even you think about this sort of shared sequencing or multi roll-up locking system that I'm going to build 2 blocks concurrently to be able to satisfy asynchronous compatibility in that. Now the argument is that, first of all, be able to lock across multiple rollups in the context of many, many different type of app applications is going to be challenging. How many locks would you need? How do you have lock contention? Can you really, have the lock when you need it, right? That's number one. And number two is, let's say you have the capacity to lock the 2 chains. Now, once you do that from the sequencer, the shared sequencer's point of view, who am I going to, work with to build the block on both chains? And then if you want to scale, everything is easy when it's low scale. Everything is easy to 5 chains. Now, if you have 50 to 100 chains, nobody can concurrently build multiple blocks on 50 chains, right? So now as a sequencer, the sequencer is basically a shared solver, like shared blockchain building solver, right? So the sequencer now has to work with somebody else to build multiple blocks together. Then what happens? The sequencer has to say, I'm going to make a sequencer commitment, right? To say, I'm willing to collaborate with solvers, searchers, whoever you call that can optimize my block across multiple, like these 2 long tail chains that I have no idea about how to do. And then you have an intent again. Intent come back, because that sequencer commitments to searchers and block builders on long tail chains is an intent-centric application, because the sequencer have to make a commitment for the searchers, searchers, or block builders to perform work for them, and then take the fee that the sequencer committed. So intents come back in a different way, right?
Yeah,
In that context.
And it's typically it's typically going to be around block building mostly, in the sequencer example. It's kind of funny. You got me thinking like, oh shit, shared sequencing and like coordinated block building is actually also not synchronous in a sense. Like it is
They cannot
the same
be.
block, but it's like it's still
they cannot be.
You have to fight for that atomic inclusion and then execution, which is quite interesting. One more thing, and then I think we got to bounce. I'm sure Rob's got a couple more questions, but I was just curious about like this, like how would you actually define the solver networks and solver categories? Like, I know that we had some conversation about it. Obviously, within the realms of the map, it's like, it's tough to kind of like get too deep in the technical weeds, but like, why is this not accurate for solver networks and solvers? Or maybe like, how would you further expand solver networks, solvers, and then like maybe solver infra? Like, how would you categorize these? And like, what are the differences exactly with solver networks, solver infra, solvers, or kind of how else you would categorize this?
Yeah, again, there's no definitive sort of, answers to these. Everything is sort of just evolving, right? But my definition would be a solver would be like an entity or like a most likely company nowadays that operate their own servers, running their own infrastructure, and then they build all their software and they integrate with specific applications, right? So some of the examples here, say propeller heads would be definitely solver. And then there are other solvers here I'm not going to name, but I mean, we work with a lot of solvers as well. They typically are not so, high profile, well known and whatnot. But if you in the solver space, you go to these meetups and side events, you meet them, right? They're typically smaller teams. Okay. And then you have
it's good to know that our lovely project Khalani, who's working to democratize solver networks, is also speaking to private solvers behind closed doors at events. But at least they're not winter mute.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they are our customers, right? We want to integrate with them. But yeah. Okay. So then you have solver networks. So the way I will describe solver networks is you have sort of multiple solvers that provide similar services, right? Either it's about a trade or about, swapping across different blockchains and whatnot, right? So they do something similar, right? And they can provide similar services, but there are a multitude of them, right? So then for an intent application, it's valuable because you can say, well, what if one solver is down? If I just integrate a single solver, what if their servers are down? Then my app won't work. And also there's no competition, right? So there's no optimization if it's only a single solver. So solver network can say, hey, I need to go cross-chain. Now I know there's a network of 10 solvers that all do the similar things. I can just give to them, and then they decide, how one of them can help me to go there. So that's my definition of solver networks, right? So it's a network of solver that do similar things. And then you have, solver infrastructure, and, this is what, we describe ourselves, Khalani is the place you build solvers. So we're not a solver network. The same way you wouldn't say Ethereum is a smart contract network, right? Ethereum is not multiple smart contracts put together. Ethereum is where you build smart contracts and build dApps, right? So Khalani is not, 100 solvers as a service or 100 solvers waiting there to, compete for your request. Khalani is the place you build solvers on top of, right? So that, at least from our definition, we call it solver infrastructure or solver platform, just to be a little bit sort of different.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I got maybe two more questions. One is like, you guys are like the blockchain to build solvers, essentially. And so are you guys using like one of these, general rollup or blockchain frameworks like OP Stack or Arbitrum, Nitro, or so it's something more bespoke, right? So what is kind of like are you guys using the EVM or a different VM, or what could you kind of just allude to like some more of the technical details that you guys are using to build out?
So okay, I think there are certain things that are more interesting in terms of not interesting about Khalani. Obviously we run a consensus, obviously we there's a token model and all that stuff. That's kind of not interesting. But the core thing that we bring to the table is a language and the virtual machine, right? So we build our own virtual machine, and then we have our own unique state model, and then we build our language as well, sort of to express this. We call the solving module, the core module we deploy to Khalani, and so we're not using any sort of off-the-shelf stuff from the stacks.
Cool. And I guess like one of my last questions, like when?
When? That's also my question when I talk to our engineers. Yeah, man, it's we built the entire thing from scratch, and we want to be able to launch a early network, sort of with crutches, right? With some shortcuts, and there will be some centralized parts of the entire system, and we use pretty simple settlement for all this. So we hope to bring that much earlier, but the entire sort of the final architecture will take a lot longer. So it definitely won't be this year. Hard to promise beyond that.
Are you guys gonna have like the idea is like you guys have support for anything, right? Like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana as like this, and then there's solvers that are able to solve on those for those particular routes.
These are going to be applications on Khalani, right?
Right.
So just like Uniswap, like if you say, does Ethereum support all the tokens? Well, if they're apt to support the tokens, then Ethereum you can do that with Ethereum, right? So it's the same idea. As long as there are solvers willing to go to these chains and support certain assets, hold inventory, and trust certain attestation conditions and whatnot, then yeah, user can interact with them and express the intents and be solved.
Very cool. And very, very low latency, which I think is going to be
very, very low latency.
One of my favorite things about as you were describing like how fast this is like essentially once the solver has the credible commitment, like it's essentially as fast as information can propagate.
Yes.
Which is just faster than the speed of light. And I think, that to me is something that I found pretty fascinating.
So this is the thing, right? So if you think, if you allow me to take some logical shortcuts here, right? So we all talk about chain abstraction, we all talk about, chain integration, reunite the fragmentation, and so on and so forth. Now you have two ways. One is you unite them on the chain level, right? We talk about the chain-centric worldview in the very beginning, or you integrate with the mempool level, right? You can sort of, because mempool is basically off-chain, peer-to-peer networks, the information propagation, all that. If you can have all the chains have to have a shared mempool, and also a credible commitment machine, and then also peer-to-peer proving and all that sort of things. Again, a lot of stuff that we're building. You can integrate all the bespoke blockchains at this level. And guess what? It's super fast. It's super fast, low latency, safe, and opt-in based peer-to-peer transactions. That's kind of the idea we're going.
So Khalani nodes, right, are all over this network, and then the Khalani mempool is like the mempool from the nodes propagate these transactions or these intents into the Khalani mempool, and then the Khalani mempool is almost like this global mempool for the entire worldview of all the chains and all the intents. Is that I guess like, is that kind of like the goal for Khalani, is to have a one universal mempool that solvers can solve?
That's not enough. So you have universal mempool for solver to take action. We strictly talk about latency, right? So latency determined by when the solver is ready to do the thing on the destination chain, right? But that's not the entire picture, because after the solver do something on the destination chain, guess what? The solver needs to be paid. The solver needs to say, okay, we'll talk about solver-solver collaboration. Khalani work exclusively in the sort of within the solver's realm, right? So solver start things, solver finish things, and we do solver-to-solver peer proofs, right? So this is why a mempool is not enough, right? Because you also have to allow solver-to-solver settlement, right? So if I'm a solver, I say, hey, I call the transaction of the source chain, and I make a credible commitment. Somebody do this to me on the destination chain. Maybe it's a Bitcoin I don't have access to. I don't know how to do it. And now the other person say, oh, you have credible commitments right away, like mempool. Again, allow me to take some logical shortcuts here, right? So oh, it's final, instantly. Then I can do that also instantly for you. But the settlement between you and me are going to be later. Solver-solver settlement is going to be later, right? And the solver-solver settlement needs not just a mempool, it needs a blockchain. This is where solver-solver settlement happens.
And so Khalani is like a combination of the intent mempool and then also the solver-to-solver settlement.
Yeah, so Khalani on-chain is for solver-solver settlement, right? So Khalani on-chain does two things: solver-to-solver coordination. In other words, discover your counterparty. As a solver, Khalani help you to find who I can work with based on in the context of specific intent, right? So we use formal methods to define intents. So when you see intents coming in, you know what this intent is about, and then you look at what's on chain, and you can discover who can work with you to fill this intent. So we do coordination on sort of pre-solve coordination, right? Mm-hmm. And then
so there's an intent mempool off chain, and then there's a transaction, almost like an asset topography on chain of which solvers have inventory on which chains. That part is like an on-chain account model, and then there's an off-chain mempool for intent.
Yeah, it's not. Again, we don't prescribe a global mempool, right? So every individual solver and solver network or intent application have their private mempool, and that's fine too, right? So this is where Noma calls information flow control. You can control the information instead of always broadcast everything globally. You can also say, this is the choice of either the wallet, if it's user aligned, or the application, if it is, if it's app aligned, mm-hmm. to say, where am I going to send to the information, right? Maybe I send to my own solver networks, right? Maybe Aave can have their Aave solver network, and to say, here's how I start to propagate to, and I can even pick a permission list of solvers who can be the counterparty to the solution. So it's all, So it's not a single mempool, but it could be multiple mempools. But then again, that's just peer-to-peer network, sort of that considerations. Yeah.
Fascinating. Very cool. Yeah, I think I'm all out of questions.
Okay. All right. That's a great. That's a good place to end, I guess.
Yeah. Why don't you show your Twitter? Like, where can people find you and try and research and learn more?
Yeah. So I'm KNWANG Kevin Wang on Twitter. For Khalani, it's just Khalani KHALANI _network, right? Khalani network at Khalani _network. That's our Twitter.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. We went over an hour. This was fantastic.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Awesome.